Hello everyone. This is a video about group bias, that is the tendency of humans to form in groups with people we assume to be like ourselves in some way and out groups of people we assume are different. It's also a video examining another video, one by YouTuber Black Pigeon Speaks, titled Harvard Diversity Plus Proximity Equals Republican Voters. That's novel. A video responding to another video. I predict that this responsive video, which we just invented right now, will be the hot new trend of 2019. Right then, Black Pigeon's video. As always, I suggest that you go and watch that video first, and I'll include a link below for anyone inclined. However, for anyone who would not like to hear Black Pigeon speak, which is fair enough to be honest, I'll here summarize his argument. So, Black Pigeon Speak starts out by recounting the so-called conventional wisdom that says demographic changes will make it harder, if not impossible, for Republicans to win elections in the United States, leading to Democratic control of government. However, do not fret, all you Republicans out there. Black Pigeon then introduces our study. Well, actually, before he gets to the study, he waffles about Bernie Sanders and Ock for a while, even though they have nothing to do with anything he's talking about. But whatever, we'll be charitable and not dwell on that. So, okay. He then introduces the study, which is causal effect of intergroup contact on exclusionary attitudes by Riand. Inos. Black Pigeon calls this a new study, but it isn't really. It was released more than 4 years before Black Pigeon's video talking about it, but again, that's a nitpick. Now, Black Pigeon claims that the study shows that, quote, the liberal resolve of affluent Democrats can be completely and utterly dissolved when racially or ethnically charged issues like neighborhood integration are at stake. He also introduces a book by the author of the study, That Being the Space Between Us, published in 2017. That Being this published As Black Pigeon is introducing this book, he shows a graphic of a hammer and sickle with an American flag pattern. And why does he do this? I have no idea. Go and watch it. It's got nothing to do with anything he's talking about. It's great. Answers on a postcard, please. Black Pigeon is getting his information from both the study and the book from a New York Times article entitled How Much Can Democrats Count on Suburban Liberals? By Thomas Bedsall. Now, reading out this article forms the basis of Black Pigeon's video script. He just changes the phrasing slightly here and there to make it slightly less obvious he's copying. So let's quote this article directly now and find out about the study in question. And I quote, 6 years ago, INOS looked at 9 townships southwest of Boston that were overwhelmingly racially and politically liberal as such. These communities were a test of the power of demographic change because these were people who we might think would be unlikely to change their attitudes in the face of immigration. And I disagree here. I'd say you can only trust a liberal as far as you can throw them, but that's just me. Enos and his colleagues conducted an experiment which is described in detail in a 2014 paper, Causal Effect of Intergroup Contact on Exclusionary Attitudes, published by the National Academy of Sciences. The results are thought-provoking. End quote. So there we go, folks. An initial exclusionary reaction that diminishes with repeat contact. That is what the author of this study says that the results of the study suggest. Now, Black Pigeon completely avoids mentioning the diminished reaction among the group being surveyed over the longer time period, and as such, misrepresents the findings of the study. It's classic cherry-picking there. Now then, it would be very easy to just leave off here, giving the impression that this initial shock leading to integration outcome is the natural and inevitable result of 2 different groups meeting. And while that is often the case, sometimes it is not. And the integration can happen at varying rates, depending on various factors. So as tempting as it would be to simply point out the lie in Black Pigeon's video and then swish me cape and vanish into the night, I think there's a fair bit more to say here. Although I am no expert here, by the way. I will read one book about it, this one. But this is YouTube, so, land of the blind and all that. So then, when I was reading the space between us, I was surprised to encounter an idea that I'd never heard before, but that seems relatively obvious after I'd read it. An area can be very racially diverse, but also still heavily segregated. Now, the book includes this map of Chicago as an example, and also includes this other map, which is a random reordering of the population of Chicago as a comparison there. So even if someone lives in a city that is very diverse on paper, they might inhabit a section of the city, a neighborhood or suburb, for example, that is not diverse at all. People don't experience the entirety of whatever city they live in, do they? You know, they live and work in only a small part of it, usually. So what's the significance of that? Well, understanding all that, it's not really as much of a shock as Black Pigeon makes it out to be that white liberals living in a mostly white area would react with shock when exposed to an outgroup. You know, frankly, I consider it more of a shock that they started to get over it in only 2 weeks, but that's just me. And I'd like to consider the impulse to point to this study as if to say, aha, see, group bias does exist. This is a line of argument I see racists try to take occasionally. Racism is just another term for a natural and logical in-group preference, they say. Now, to that I would argue that the human tendency to form in-groups and prefer them to outgroups does not justify racial bias. It actually undermines it. And you're gonna have to stick with me here. First, consider the Spanish-speaking people that were part of the train study. Some of the white people who used the same stations and trains as those people showed an increased bias against immigrants. However, and I think this is rather important, those Spanish-speaking people weren't doing anything wrong. They were just riding the trains around the same as the other passengers. You know, could we argue that the heightened group bias of the white passengers was therefore illogical because it was being triggered by completely innocuous behavior? Now, the obvious response to that line of thinking is that even though those particular Spanish-speaking people on the trains weren't doing anything wrong, their presence could have conjured in the minds of the white passengers various negative things associated with immigrants, say crime, gangs, drugs, and whatevs. For an example of the sorts of negative things one might hear about immigrants into the United States, let's hear from Black Pigeon Speaks, and this is from his video titled The Amerimex Future of the United States. Now, with that quote in mind, let's watch a clip from the end of his Diversity plus Proximity equals Republican voters video. Something else to consider when thinking of those that prognosticate a blue America is that Latino Americans are increasingly identifying themselves as white. Between the 2000 and 2010 censuses, about 7 of Hispanics changed their self-description from some other race to white. At the same time, according to the Census Bureau, 3/4 of white population growth in 21st century America has been driven by individuals who declared themselves white and of Hispanic origin. If increasing numbers of Hispanics identify as white and their descendants are defined as white in government statistics, there may be a white majority in the U.S. throughout the 21st century. It is also possible that as Latinos assimilate and intermarry, they will move from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party, following a trail blazed in the past by many white ethnic voters of European descent, including Irish Americans and Italian Americans. Now then, you might be wondering what the fuck. You know, what are immigrants to Black Pigeon speaks. 1 minute, they re a vast horde of barbarians flowing across the border and taking over. And the next minute, they re all assimilating and intermarrying and voting Republican and identifying as white. How can they be both? You know, are they gonna integrate or not? It seems like Black Pigeon speaks. Answer is dependent upon the particular argument he's having at the time. It seems like as long as you re-owning the libs, you can basically swap out any of your beliefs on the fly. Thanks a lot for watching, everyone. Some news. We're coming up on 200,000 subscribers over here at Scene. I never could think of a good name. How exciting, though. All of you should do me a favor and tell a friend about the channel, and then we'll hit 400,000 subscribers. Do that, in fact, please. I want to catch a bomb up, and it doesn't look like it's happening by itself anytime soon, unfortunately, so I'm gonna have to resort to begging. Thanks, as always, to all of me patrons over on Patreon. I'm gonna go with Patreon today. There was a bit of a credit kerfuffle last video. Hopefully, everything is sorted this time. If not, let me know, and I'll fix it eventually. I'll put links to me Twitter and Curious Cat accounts below if you'd like to give me a follow or ask me a question. I'll also include a link to our Twitch channel. I get quite a lot of messages on Twitch expressing surprise that I'm on there, so I thought I'd mention it here. Me and Jen and Pete stream on Twitch on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays and Sundays, and sometimes other days, too. So, there you go. Now you know. Okay, folks, that's it from me. I'll see you next time.